Hi, and welcome to episode 15 of the Trail Encounters. Today we're going to talk about a subject that is really kind of worrisome for a lot of people, and some people are really excited about it. So our topic is AI. And tell me, what are some things that you're hearing?
Well, I think the biggest thing I want to say before we start is we're not going to give an exhaustive view of AI, mostly because we don't know what it is yet. I mean, that sounds kind of strange, but I know you've got Claude or ChatGPT or Grok or whatever you use, but even so, kind of what is it is the question. We're in the midst of it right now as it becomes part of our world and part of our society. So there's a lot of questions being asked about it. I remember when postmodernity was a question in theological circles, and it's like when you're in the midst of something, it's hard to define what it is because it's changing. And the same thing is going on with AI right now.
Well, I know, and I'm finding AI to be very interesting because I really love how it does a lot of things, like, you know, fixing an email sentence or something like that. It can be really, really
Creating
helpful.
graphics or videos.
And then I come up with the idea of like, okay, what if what I'm reading is actually true or not based off what AI has found?
Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest things we're running into. Even as an engineer, when I ask questions of AI, that's a technical question, it's not always correct. Which gets to a topic of personification of AI. There's a lot of talk at this point about making AI seem like this entity. It's got a personality, and so we personify it. And so even I've seen where we'll talk about the errors it makes, the mistakes it makes, as hallucinations or lies. And I thought, gosh, you know, when I was in school and I was taking a math test, I couldn't say, I'm sorry, teacher, I got that problem wrong because I was hallucinating. You know, it was a flat out error.
Good, it would just be
or sorry, I got the history
awkward.
question wrong, I lied. You know, like, no, I mean, but we are attaching these personifications to AI. And I read an article recently that talked about one of the reasons maybe that's being done by these companies is so they can get access to data, whether that be copyrighted materials, books, information, because if they can take this information and say it's being used to teach AI as an educational thing, then there's different rules for the use of copyrighted materials. So it can kind of bring information together without falling by the same rules as using copyrighted materials.
Well, and I also feel like by personifying it, that it lends it some kind of credence in some way that people trust it more. I don't know, it seems like kind of counterintuitive that you would think that some kind of computer that knows everything would be more trustworthy, but lending that, you know, a voice or a picture or something, it makes it more real.
Well, and that's, I think, yeah, part of it. Like once you kind of create this idea that it has all this information and therefore it can objectively study everything and kind of know everything and give us objective answers.
Or truth.
Or truth.
That's the thing.
Yeah, is a big problem. Because again, it's taking a lot of information and it's then trying to arrange it or organize it in such a way to give us an answer to a question. But how it does that is a program.
Right.
Not a personality. And so when it comes to AI, you're right, Stacy, we're going to come down to this question of what is truth? Where do I find truth? And who do I trust to give me truth? And that's not a new question. That goes back to people too. We all have perspectives. John Polkinghorne called it our spectacles behind the eyes. The way we see the world and interpret the world, that becomes a truth that we teach. In the same way, AI is going to have that same sense of whoever programmed it will have its own agenda, its spectacles behind the eyes as well.
Right, and it's funny too because I don't know how you guys were, but as I was growing up, it was always that you could just trust that people would be telling you the truth, and you know, I don't know, that was kind of inherent in that.
Yeah, people thought, you know, well, if it's in print, it's got to be true, right? If it's black and white, it's got to be true. And we've seen more recently that a lot of that's not true either. That there's a lot of deception and uncertainty and those kinds of things out there. Agendas, exactly. And that it's kind of, we're wondering now, where is truth found? Now, that being said, before we get into this, I kind of want to say too that there's two things about AI. It's artificial intelligence. And the first is it's artificial.
Right.
It doesn't experience the world the way we do. We experience the world around us. We go outside, we see the stars, we touch the grass. We experience people in this world. Artificial intelligence experiences the world as we have given it to it, right? As we have interpreted or we have explained it, shown it. That's what it is using. So it's already, in a sense, interpreted before it even gets it to some degree.
Good point.
Either through language or whatever. The other side of it is it's artificial intelligence. Well, what is intelligence? Well, I looked it up in Oxford Dictionary just to see what, kind of like a where do we start kind of question. And it says this: it's the ability to learn, understand, and think in a logical way about things. Interesting definition.
Yeah, but it definitely doesn't understand or
learn. That's the other thing too. This idea that we're going to teach or AI is going to learn. No, it's fed information into a program or searching information across the internet. Learning is something different. Learning to me involves experience. In fact, Oxford here again, quote them, says learning is tied to experience. So does AI experience the world? Well, no. It does it through its programmers or the information that has been given onto or placed onto the internet. So, it is interpreting the world based on what it's been given. We interpret the world much differently. Our dogs, we have two really wonderful dogs.
So cute.
They experience the world differently than AI, right? Because they're in the world. They experience the world, as do we. And that gets into learning. Learning is so much deeper than just having information. So I thought of a couple of examples of this. Take, for example, pi, the number pi, 3.14 ad infinitum, right? This number that goes on forever. We saw a TV show not too long ago that talked about pi as containing all numbers. So
your birthday, your social security number, the house you grew up in.
All those numbers are somewhere in pi. That's kind of cool way to think about pi, right?
It really is.
But what is pi? It's not just a number. It's the ratio of a circumference of a circle to its diameter. That's all it is. So every time you see a tire or a circle, pi is in that. All those numbers, like you said, your birthday, your locker combination, all that is in that tire that's going around and around on the road. It's the circumference divided by the diameter. Just kind of blows you away as far as it's right there in front of us. Or take, for example, the relationship between a circle and its radius. As we spin that radius around the circle, we get a sine wave. And a sine wave, that waveform, is kind of in everything from vibrations to light, radio signals, almost every waveform that we have in our world that we experience. Like right now, as you're watching this video and the light that's shining on us, all those waveforms come from a circle and its radius. It's just beautiful the way this kind of, the very simplicity and complexity all together in our world. Or we talked about before. What's your favorite?
Good.
Fibonacci, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the Fibonacci sequence. I mean, it's in flowers and
spiral.
plants and spirals. And so anyway, my point is, there's so much incredible stuff in our world that's so simple. We see it every day, but yet so complex and forms this kind of background to the world we live in. And so learning is part of that too. Again, not just the information, how many digits you can recite pi to, but encountering it in the real world. So that's part of it as well.
Well, there also seems to be a lot of fear behind it as well. I know, like some of our kids and younger students are thinking about, well, am I going to have a job?
Yeah, and really there's fear on two ends of the spectrum. There is the fear, like you said, of people not having jobs because AI is going to replace them. In fact, the University of Arizona recently, their commencement speaker, who was a former CEO at Google, Eric Schmidt, when he spoke about embracing AI, the students booed for a long time. because they didn't want to hear it. Because they've got massive student debt and no job to go into. And so, yeah, there's some fear. Now, are their fears legitimate? It remains to be seen. We're in the midst of this transition.
Yeah.
At the same time, Boeing's not going to change it. We've got to deal with the fact that it's here and learn how to use it or experience it, those kinds of questions. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, Stacy, is kind of our generation, right? Where we're more afraid of Skynet, right? And Terminator or The Matrix and The Architect or 1984, where AI is going to come in and, send Arnold Schwarzenegger back through time to get us or to control us or, something along those lines. And those fears, again, may or may not be realized. Yes, we are being observed more than we have ever before. There's facial recognition, tracking of our data, stuff along those lines. So it's not, an unsupported or advertisement.
I'm sorry.
That's
Advertisement, yeah.
Or listening in on our conversations through our phone, there's some of that stuff going on, and it's not an unsubstantiated fear, but we gotta be careful too about, looking for the boogeyman behind every single electronic device. So again, people are afraid, they're wary of what AI is going to do and be. My concern, personally, is a bit different. Those things are probably out there, but for me, it has to deal with who we are as humans and our effort that we put into our lives. And that sounds kind of strange. So, and this goes back further than AI. So kind of in 2000 to 2010, we began to see a change. It's kind of the opposite of what's called the Flynn effect. So the Flynn effect said that every decade, our IQ went up by 3 points. However, around 2000 to 2010, that began to stabilize and even reverse itself.
Well, I know that's when our kids were little, and I started really noticing. I was homeschooling for a while, and I kept thinking about, okay, these kids have so many distractions with computer games and all that. It really plays into attention.
That's exactly right. So what we began to see was that fluid intelligence, vocabulary, attention span, those things began to decrease. And there's an increase in impulsivity, that people were more impulsive than they were before. Because it went from learning and reasoning and contemplating and meditating and thinking through things, you got the headlines. I mean, think about it today. You've heard of doom scrolling, right? What is doom scrolling? Headline, 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 photo, photo, headline. No stopping to think about what's being said or how it's being said or asking truthful questions about it. We saw this in episode 14, right? That video that was kind of floating around about Psalm 22. I mean, how many times was that just forwarded on? This is really great. How cool is this? And not asking questions about, well, is it true? Is it helpful? Those kinds of things. So Nicholas Carr wrote a book called The Shallows. And in it, he talks about how the internet is diminishing our attention span, our ability to deeply focus on things or to contemplate. And by the way, contemplation, meditation, study are all classic Christian practices. We are meant to contemplate and think and reason and show wisdom. And some of those things are being taken away by the immediate or the impulsivity of looking at an answer. So hey AI, what is the answer to this question? Hey AI, what did Jesus say about X? Those kinds of things, we get the answer and we don't have to work through the answer or think about it.
Or it's an answer. It may not be the answer.
Yeah, exactly. Because again, AI is pulling from all this information. And so how do you know what it's pulling is helpful? You may have a 40-year scholar who's a thoughtful Christian on one side, and then someone over here who's just using nefarious methods to say stuff on this side. And it's pulling all of that. So how do you know how it's going to use all that information to give you the answer you're looking for? So you have to discern. You have to think through the information yourself to really honestly get at it. So kind of where this heads for me is that learning takes effort. Learning is a struggle. We don't learn by downloading information. God didn't set us up that way. We don't go and plug ourselves into somewhere and download the information we need for a new language.
Yeah. In the Matrix, they did that, and I really, really liked that function.
Yes, and in fact, people like that, exactly like you're saying. Like,
Yeah.
that'd be great to go, and I know Kung Fu, or the TV show Chuck does the same thing,
Yeah.
right? He has all the information just downloaded into him. Instead, when we learn, it takes effort and struggle, which is why cramming for an exam doesn't work.
Right.
You may have the information for an hour or
Period of
two
time. Mhm.
and pass your test, but did you learn anything? Can you hold on to it? Can you use it in the future in a conversation or at work so learning takes time for your brain to work through things and to ingrain it into yourself. Learning is an experience,
Right.
not a program. You don't just download it. I think that's kind of the fallacy of The Matrix or Chuck or TV shows like that. We have to work at learning. And so AI can make us lazy, and we stop making the effort and we stop learning. And that, to me, is one of the biggest dangers of AI.
Well, and just being able to use AI to get an instant answer makes you feel like maybe you're smart, but it's really not you learning.
Yeah, exactly. You're kind of faking it till you make it. There's a great book called The Talent Code, which talks about how we learn and how we grow and how we become better at things. And in it says this: struggling in certain targeted ways, operating at the edge of your ability where you make mistakes makes you smarter. Or to put it a slightly different way, experiences where you're forced to slow down, make errors, and correct them, as you would if you were walking up an ice-covered hill, slipping and stumbling as you go, end up making you swift and graceful without your realizing it. So the example I could give here is when I was learning Hebrew and Greek, I always did flashcards, like the old index cards, and I had a shaving cream kit that was full of all these index cards, because you have to write them down, and you have your handwriting, and you did that physical thing, and then you read them out loud, and you flip through them, and there's a physical sense to doing that. I've always learned better doing that system than using something like Quizlet, where you're just kind of flipping on your phone and you're seeing it. There's more to it when you recite it out loud, write it by hand, do that kind of work. Even at work, when I take notes in meetings, AI can like summarize your meeting, automatically for you. It's all bullet pointed and perfectly
Pretty.
spelled and wonderful, right? I still do it by hand because there's a process of me writing it down that allows me to recall it if I need it later. Whereas when I just get the summary on AI, it looks better. Maybe I can save it, in a file someplace, but I don't remember it. It's not part of my experience anymore. Whereas writing it down makes it part of my experience in the world. I think that's part of how God made us. That's kind of how we're built, how we're put together. Another example from the Talent Code, there was a study done at Stanford by Dr. Carol Dweck, and she studied 400 fifth graders in New York, and she gave them all a test. After the test, there were two groups of kids. One group of kids was told, "You're really smart at this." Another group was told, "You worked really hard at this." So one was about their intelligence, right, their ability. The other was about how hard they worked. Half were praised for their intelligence, half were praised for their effort. So the two groups. Then they were offered a chance to take a harder test or an easier test. The kids that were praised for their intelligence, most of them wanted the easier test. 90% of them wanted the easier test. Why? Because once you've been praised for your intelligence, you don't want to kind of be shown up, right? So the easier test makes sure you can kind of keep that intelligence at the forefront. The kids who are told they worked hard at it, based on their effort, those kids wanted the harder test, right? So then what happened? They were offered a third, even harder test, and no one did well. The kids who were praised for their intelligence hated it, didn't like it at all, because it showed them in their mind as not being intelligent. The kids praised for their effort, for their work, they loved it. They engaged it, they thought it was fun, they kind of got into it because it allowed them to continue to show effort. Now here's the cool thing.
Interesting.
All the kids were then given the first test again. Okay, so they went back to the first test, gave it to them again. The kids who were praised for their intelligence showed a 20% decline in their performance. So they did worse than the first time. The kids praised for their effort did 30% better.
Why is that?
There's something to do in our lives with the effort put into it, right? When we put effort into something, that's what makes us grow and learn. So when we're just given the answer, we become lazy, and there's a false sense of reality, a false sense of security, and that is a bad thing for us as humans. I think we have to struggle in the world that we're part of. We have to struggle to learn, and that's a good thing, and we can celebrate those accomplishments.
Right.
Right.
Well, I do find it interesting that I think that when you're told you're intelligent all the time without the effort, that when you don't do as well, you start thinking that either they lied or you're not really smart, and that makes it harder. If you think that you're not smart, you're going to keep doing worse, because then you're kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy in that way.
Yeah. And effort, you can always put in effort. You know, whether you're smart or not, fast or not, strong or not, those kind of things, even like whether it's in music, sports, academia, that the effort is something you can do. You can put in the effort.
Yeah.
And that will give you a sense of pride. Did you do your best at whatever you're trying to do? And only you can answer that question.
Right.
And I think when you put in your best effort with success or failure, there's a sense of accomplishment that comes with that. That's
Absolutely.
really important.
And you do continue to get better.
So what kind of brought a lot of this up was on May 15th, Pope Leo issued an encyclical, this document that talked about AI. And in the first paragraph it says, humanity, created by God in all its grandeur, is today facing a pivotal choice, either to construct a new Tower of Babel or to build the city in which God and humanity dwell together. Then he goes on in the 7th paragraph to kind of explain that. He says, in order to answer these questions and discern how to navigate responsibly the era of AI, I would like to bring to mind two scenes from the Bible: the construction of the Tower of Babel and the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem, which is found in Nehemiah chapter 2 through 6. So what the Pope is kind of saying here is that, was this pivotal moment of AI going to be about kind of, bringing God to us or us going to God, depending on how you read Tower of Babel, or this collaborative agreement between people to build something new, like the walls in Jerusalem under Nehemiah? So with all due respect to the Pope, I think there's a better story in the Bible that describes our challenges with AI. And that is found in Genesis chapter 3 and the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, when they encounter Satan at the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, or the tree of the knowledge of good and bad, depending on how you translate that. So if you recall in this story, Adam and Eve are in the garden. They're naked, they're unafraid, they're living there with God, and God gave them one thing not to do. One thing: don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Don't eat from that tree. One thing. And then this happens. So verse 4, the serpent said to the woman, you will certainly not die, for God knows that on the day when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and bad. The woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and the tree was desirable to make one wise. She took from its fruit and ate, and she gave also to her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed together fig leaves and made themselves coverings. Okay, so first off, it's the woman's fault. No, I'm just kidding. No. Okay, so what's the temptation here? There's this tree. God says don't eat from it. Satan says, hey, look, you're not going to die. I mean, really, seriously, right? And so she sees this fruit, and she says it's good for food, so the appetite. It's beautiful, so the sight, the way things look. Again, both temptations in our world today, right? Eating and things we shouldn't be looking at on the internet, okay? And then the third one is to make one wise. And Satan says to be like God.
Right.
So what is the temptation there?
To be like God, for sure.
Yeah, to know everything. It's the shortcut.
Yes, it
right?
absolutely
You
is.
eat that and you get the information, right?
Yeah, it's a matrix download.
Yeah, the knowledge of good and bad, the knowledge of all things. You'll be like God. You'll know everything. Right? So in a sense, to me, this is kind of the temptation we're kind of getting at here. And it sounds great until God shows up. And he goes, oh my goodness, we're naked. And we've disobeyed God. And we're not all that we are cracked up to be. And kind of like reality hits, and they're afraid. So again, they try to take a shortcut, but then that's not how God made the world, right? And by the way, just as maybe a break here, I see this going on in translations of the Bible as well. We talked about this again in episode 14, that there are a lot of translations, and the translations that we have today are interpretations to some degree or another, right? They're made simpler, or they're trying to be made clearer, and the translators sometimes, and it's a struggle, by the way, it's a very difficult thing to do, is to translate texts, but they're interpreting as well. And so there has to be a sense that we have to struggle even with the Bible to learn. We can't just say, look, here's the information. You just got to download what God told us. There's a struggle in the process, right?
Right. Well, I mean, even in the Bible, Jesus uses parables to teach, and they're not direct. You have to struggle with what he's trying to say.
Yeah, it hasn't meet my life. So I take the parable of the four soils, which there's 4 different soils Jesus talks about there. And they all have different things, whether it's rocks or weeds or whatever. And you may be a different soil, right? So that parable hits you differently than it does me.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, we have to bring ourselves to the text, as well as those who wrote it, those who interpret it. There's a lot going on there than just the information itself. Now throw AI into the mix. So you go in and type in, what did Jesus say about X, Y, and Z? It's going to pull from whatever translation or whatever speaker or whatever sermon or whatever's out there to give you an answer based on its spectacles behind the eyes, its programming. And that's another change that's going to be brought into this mix. So instead of us contemplating, meditating, studying the text for ourselves, we may just go for the quick answer.
Right. Well, and that's one reason we created The Trail. It is a study of the Bible, and you can go through it in a year or longer, depending on how you want to do it. But Frank gives insights on what the text is all about because he has studied it. And so I recommend, if you want to learn more about the Bible, to be sure to use people that know the text.
Yeah, especially the trust thing, right? Who do you trust and why? And by the way, in The Trail, I will say this, it's designed to be a book that you write in because we're very interested in you putting down your thoughts into the trail so you can pass it along to generations after you.
Yeah, the legacy part is so great.
Because they know you, right? So you want your notes in that book. So again, it's part of this whole process of writing it down, studying, struggling, and then passing it on to someone else.
Yeah.
Because you want to be trustworthy to do that. Okay, now there's something else I want to talk about briefly on this. And like I said, intellect is about experience to me, about learning, engaging our world, seeing our world. What I find interesting as I look at the book of Proverbs is that a lot of the wisdom we find in the book of Proverbs is found in the natural world. It's not just don't be lazy, be smart, that kind of thing. It's like it looks at our world and kind of interprets our world for us in the light of wisdom and how it applies to us. So I thought we'd look at a couple examples of this. Just because of how the Bible chooses to teach us wisdom, to me is very intriguing because it's experiential. It's in our world. So for example, in Proverbs 20 verse 4, it says, "The lazy person does not plow in season. Harvest comes, and there's nothing to be found." So again, this isn't just agricultural information. Like if you don't plant your seeds on time, you're not going to get any fruit. Like we get that, right? They were farmers for the most part. But when it comes to putting in the effort, are you going to do the work to study for the test ahead of time? You're going to cram for it. If you cram for it, you aren't going to bear any fruit on the exam. Or if you're trying to learn how to do something or play an instrument, if you don't practice and put in the effort early, your recital is going to be terrible, right? So there is a sense that we look at these things like just the simple fact of you got to plant a seed and it's got to take time and water and effort and growth and weeding and all those things applies to all of your life. You have to put in the effort to see results. Another one, Proverbs 26:13. The lazy person says, "There's a line in the road. There's a line in the streets." And so they don't do anything. Like this idea that we can come up with all kinds of excuses not to do something.
Well, and this is like being paralyzed with fear.
Absolutely. Well, if I fail, then what? So I won't try, right? I'll look stupid, so I won't study. I'm not an athlete, so I won't train. Those kinds of things. And so if you're going through your whole life afraid of a line in the street, you'll never experience the world. So here's a question. If there wasn't a lion in the street, what would you do? Well, do that. If a lion shows up, deal with it then. But don't assume there's a lion on every corner. Like, you have to put in effort in life, is what this is saying, and not be afraid of every little thing that can come up or things that could go wrong.
And I think that's one of the greatest gifts that God has given us, is that being here on earth to experience everything and to learn is such a gift. It's almost like a training ground to get closer to Him.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, God made the world a certain way, created us a certain way for a reason, right? We keep trying to go around that for some reason, to find the shortcuts. There's another one out there that I really like too. Proverbs 26, verse 14. As a door turns on its hinge, so does a lazy person in bed. I mean, the imagery is just awesome. Because you got your alarm clock over here, and you roll over and you smack and you roll back over and you smack and you roll back over. This idea that like this door spinning around, you're kind of just rolling back and forth in bed. So to me, this is the people that they're trying to fake it till they make it. Like they look like they're doing something, but they're not. Like I'm looking busy at work, but I'm not learning anything.
Yep, or doing anything.
Yeah, so lazy people will look busy, but they're not doing anything.
They're not being productive.
Exactly.
At the time.
So again, same thing with AI. You can go in and get information and make a picture, right? You can, hey, draw me a picture of whatever, and it comes with an idea. But you didn't put any of yourself into that, really. So in a sense, it's kind of lazy. You're not making the effort to create. You're simply letting someone else do it for you.
Right.
Now, all of these ones we used so far, again, they're all in the natural world. They kind of lead to this last one. In Proverbs 6, verse 6 through 8, go to the ant, you lazy bones. Consider its ways and be wise. Without having any chief or officer or ruler, it prepares its food in summer and gathers its sustenance at harvest. So these little creatures know what to do.
I know how to get to my cupboard for sure.
That's true. By the way, how many ants does it take to fill an apartment?
I don't know how many.
10 ants. Sorry.
Can I do a big enough eye roll here?
You can. But so here's the idea, though, right? Is that ants know what to do by nature, right? They have to prepare food. They got to store it. They got to prepare for winter. And by taking care of themselves, they take care of the community, the colony. They don't need a president or a governor or anybody telling them what to do. They got to get things done, and they know to do that. And that's an ant. When we sit around and wait for someone to tell us what to do or to give us instructions when we know better, that's on us.
Right.
I have to ask AI what I should do. No, you know what to do. Make the effort to do it. Get involved in the world. Get involved in God's work for you. And don't just sit back and wait for it to be done for you, right? So Stacy, to me, a life without effort, a life without struggle, to me is empty. I mean, what have you accomplished?
Right.
What have you built? What have you shared? What have you participated in? I mean, that to me is an empty life. And so if AI, in its sense, is a program, it doesn't exist in the real world, so to speak, our lives become like that. It becomes empty and void of meaning, in my opinion. Now, one more example I want to use is actually from the Gospels. And it's a story that is a little more puzzling, but has a very, very important point. And that is a story that Jesus tells in Matthew 25. It's a parable of a man who's going on a journey. He's a landowner or someone very wealthy, and he puts his property into the hands of 3 of his servants. Now, that was rarely done in this period, to entrust these servants with his property. But he does. He invites them into his world. And to one, he gives 5 talents, which is a ton of money. Right? It was not a small amount. It was a lot. To another, he gives 2 talents, and to another, 1. Now, is he being unfair by giving them different amounts?
No, he says that he won't give us more than we can handle.
Exactly. So he's actually looking out for them. Like, maybe I'm a 2-talent guy. I can handle 2 talents. I can do that well. God's like, I'm not going to give you 5 talents, Frank, because you're a 2-talent guy. Maybe it's something like that, right? But in any event, he's not going to give a 1-talent person 5 talents and see them fail.
Right.
So right from the beginning of this parable, just like God wants to see us succeed. Right? Very important point to this parable. Now, this person goes away for a long time, maybe longer than expected, comes back, and the person with 5 talents is like excited because like, hey, I made you 5 more.
Oh yeah, wouldn't you be excited to give that back to them?
Exactly. He did what he got engaged. He made more money for the master. And the master says, well done, good and faithful servant, right? You've been faithful with a few things. I'll make you in charge of many things. Come enter your master's happiness. Like this beautiful story of like, you were faithful with this little bit of 5 huge talents. I'm going to give you much more to be responsible for. I'm going to invite you into my world in a much deeper way. The 2-talent person, same story. Gives 2 more and is invited in. The 1-talent person, something different happens. Let's take a look at what happens in that story. Beginning in verse 24. Then the one who had received the 1 talent also came forward, saying, Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid. I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master replied, You wicked and lazy slave. You knew, did you, that I reap where I did not sow, and gather where I did not scatter? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have received what was my own with interest. Now, do those excuses sound familiar?
Oh yes.
Right? I was afraid. I was afraid you're going to be unfair. I was afraid you're going to take it away. So I went and hid it. And the master is not happy with them because if you at least put it in the bank, you would have got interest. Mm-hmm. Now, did the servant do anything wrong? Is the big question. Because in the first century,
that was a standard practice.
If someone was giving you something and you hid it in the ground, and let's say you hid it in the ground and it was stolen, you weren't liable.
Right. Because
So it had been responsible to put it in the ground. So he didn't do anything wrong, so to speak, by first century standards. But remember, the master invited him in. So let's look at the punishment that this person receives. Verse 28. So take the talent from him and give it to the one with the 10 talents. For to all those who have, more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. As for this worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Wow, that seems so harsh.
It does. And this is a parable about the end times, right? When Jesus comes back and judges his people. Mm-hmm. So notice here that the punishment this person receives is severe. And often in the Bible, the punishment fits the crime. So what's the punishment? To be kicked out, to be removed, to be put away, to be exiled.
Separated.
Okay? So what's the crime related to that? Not being part, not engaging. So this person was invited in to the master's kingdom, so to speak, right? Mm-hmm. And was asked to participate in it. And this person said, I'm not interested. I'm afraid. I'm lazy. Whatever reason. I mean, he says he's afraid, but I think there's probably more to it than that. But whatever the excuse is, he doesn't engage. And therefore, his punishment is to be excluded. Mm-hmm. And the same goes for us. If we don't engage God's world, more specifically, the kingdom of God, and the mission given to us as Christians by Jesus, if we don't engage with the gifts he's given us, I think the punishment is the same for us.
Right, and we all have gifts. Sometimes they're harder to find than others, but we all have them.
And we all have effort.
Effort, yes.
We all have the ability to have effort. Now,
yeah, well, and let me just interject here, is that's one thing that you've always said about Frank is very knowledgeable and does a lot of different things, but you always say that you're not talented. That's crazy.
Well,
but you say that you do work hard at it.
Well, I will say this. So I'm probably better at like engineering, math, science. That stuff comes easy to me. Like that's natural to me. But like writing, public speaking, those are very difficult for me. And I think God does call us to our weaknesses because he wants to see our effort and wants us to rely upon him.
Right.
Like if I give a message that's really good, it's not me. I'm not good at those things. I have to work very, very hard at those things and rely on God for those things. And so I think God calls us to our weaknesses, to rely on him, but also not to say, well, I'm not good at that. I'm not going to do that. Because God may be saying, I'm calling you to your weaknesses so that you can rely on me. And there's a relationship there that's very, very important. And I think that goes for all of us, that maybe you're not good at something, but you can work at it.
You
right?
can become good or
Exactly.
adequate.
Or adequate. I've often said I'm not a thoroughbred. I'm more like a draft horse. I kind of just keep plugging away at things. And I'm glad about that. I don't want things to come easy because the more I study and struggle, the more I learn, and the more I find out that I can recall those things. It becomes part of kind of who I am, not just what I know. Those are two different things. And so I encourage you out there that if you're struggling with something, enjoy that. Get involved in the struggle because in that you are learning, you are growing, and you're engaging God's kingdom. He wants us to engage and to work and to struggle because we get to learn, depend on him, and grow in our wisdom and knowledge of God.
The blessing is in the struggle.
The blessings in the struggle. And so that's where, for me, AI presents its biggest difficulty, is that if we start to use it as a crutch, as a shortcut, that we're not struggling and engaging the world as God intended, and most of all, his kingdom.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And we would love it if you would like and subscribe and tell everyone you know about what we're doing here. And what else?
Well, if you have questions, please send them to us. The last couple episodes of the Trail Encounters have come from your questions. And so we love to engage your questions because those are things that are interesting to you and things you're thinking about. So again, send them to us. We would love to have a conversation about them. Okay. And with that, we'll see you next time on the Trail Encounters.